OpenAI is restructuring its org as Barret Zoff, the Thinking Machines Lab co-founder who left that company, has returned to OpenAI. Our AI reporter Stephanie Palazzolo has the scoop on where Zoff will sit at OpenAI and other inside details about OpenAI's new org structure overall. I want to bring on Stephanie to tell us more about what she has learned. Stephanie, welcome back to the show. It's great to have you.
Thanks. Great to be here.
So where is Barret going to be sitting at OpenAI now?
Yeah. So, as my colleague Aaron and I reported yesterday, Barrett is going to be leading OpenAI's push to sell AI products to enterprises, which is something that so far Anthropic has really dominated in, but has clearly become a much bigger priority for OpenAI in recent weeks and months. And we see a lot of execs like Sarah Fryer, talking very publicly about their desire to want to sell more to businesses. It does feel a little bit random just because, Barrett is most well known for being a researcher, but it's clear that enterprise is very important for them, and putting maybe a high profile person in the charge of it could be a strategy there.
Well, and enterprise is clearly how they need to focus on enterprise a little bit here to compete with the likes of Anthropic, right?
Yes, definitely. So, I think right now the way that it's set up is OpenAI is obviously most well known for its consumer product, ChatGPT, and Anthropic is more well known for selling to enterprises. But uh, you know, OpenAI has obviously done incredibly well with ChatGPT, but it seems like over time growth has kind of slowed a bit there, just in terms of, just even reaching the kind of limits of like reaching all the consumers that could be users of that sort of product. So I think at this point, OpenAI is definitely pushing more into enterprise as just a way to continue growing very quickly and as a new source of sales.
Now, one of the most interesting parts of your reporting is you got some details on how the overall org structure at OpenAI is changing as Barrett Zoff comes in. Hard to tell which came first in terms of chicken and the egg. Was it Barrett coming back?
Yeah.
Was this happening all in the first place? What do we know about this new structure that OpenAI is going to be on?
Yeah. So, as we wrote yesterday, Fiji Simo, who is currently the CEO of applications at OpenAI, basically sent out a memo to staff saying that the company is moving to this new structure known as kind of a general manager structure, where basically you have one leader who's in charge of each of the product groups. So these are things like ChatGPT, Enterprise, as I just mentioned, Codex, which is OpenAI's kind of coding tool, and ads. So some of these things are not that surprising because it's basically just a continuation of what they previously had. So specifically with ChatGPT and Codex, the people leading those are basically who have already been in charge even prior to these changes. But there were some interesting details. So specifically, Barrett leading enterprise, as we just talked about. Also, Vijay Raji, who joined OpenAI after his startup Statsig was acquired last fall, and he's a longtime Meta vet. He will actually be running ads at OpenAI, which we found to be pretty interesting. Another interesting detail is Brad Lightcap, the COO of OpenAI, will be kind of stepping back from running product and engineering for enterprise as Bear takes over, and he'll be focusing more on quote unquote commercial fu- functions. So lots of changes, but kind of the point of all this, as Fiji wrote about in her memo, is to basically tighten this relationship between product and research at OpenAI so they can influence each other more. And this is something that we've written about a lot, especially in kind of recent weeks, like this natural tension that exists between product and research at OpenAI, and sometimes the conflicting incentives that both sides have. So it seems like Fiji and the reorg is trying to combat those kind of conflicting in some way.
And I just want to understand here the idea that this addresses the conflicting tensions between what is good research, what is good product. I sort of see this GM structure as OpenAI growing up a bit and sort of creating these mini businesses around each application, which is exactly what Fujisimo came in to do. But I mean, just riff with me here. I mean, how is it that you think this GM structure gets at that tension between research and product? Is the idea that you would have, I don't know, researchers working with product engineers side by side within Codex, within ChatGPT? Did you get any color there?
Yeah, so I think essentially the idea is that each of these teams will have, product people and also researchers working together under the umbrella of the overall product. So
One big happy family.
exactly. Versus, I think today the structure is more kind of just like, hey, research is building these cool models and reasoning models and coding models and kind of doing their own thing and following whatever seems most interesting to them. And then the product teams kind of just get these models and they're like, okay, now I have to make a product with this. So on one hand, it makes sense kind of have them communicating more with each other and products saying, hey, this is like a product idea we have. How can this kind of work in with whatever research ideas you're already thinking about and vice versa? Um, but on the other hand, it does very much feel kind of like a big techification moment of OpenAI. And I think people that originally joined the company to like make super intelligence and cure diseases and colonize Mars, like being in an org that's called like the ads org or like the enterprise org feels a bit different from like, hey, we want to create, super intelligence.
Right, right. Very quickly, I do want to talk about an Anthropic story that we published today as well. But what is the latest on the saga at Thinking Machines Labs? I mean, we have this big move. Barret is gone. Three of the co-founders, I think, have left. What's the vibe over there from what you're hearing?
Yeah, yeah. No, it's been a really crazy weekend. So, so far we've reported that, 5 people in this kind of latest wave have left, including Barrett and another co-founder. And that the third co-founder you're mentioning, Andrew Tulloch, left a few months back to go to Meta. And out of this latest, wave of 5 or so people, 4 of those folks have gone back to OpenAI, which is, pretty shocking stat, to be honest. And yeah, so over this weekend, I think there were a lot of really interesting and quite dramatic stories about what exactly went down before these departures happened. It seems like there were a lot of kind of personal issues going on between Barrett and Mira specifically. So on one hand, this does seem kind of like a specific kind of personal disagreement between 2 people at this company. But I think the bigger effects of that is that we're seeing other people start to leave. And oftentimes, I think this can kind of cause like a stampede of people leaving who are um, confused about kind of where the company is going. And another important thing is that all this is kind of happening while Mira is trying to raise a new round of funding for the company. So she's trying to raise anywhere between $4 to $5 billion at a $50 billion price. And a lot of investors that we're talking to are not really sure what's going on with that and are a bit, concerned at what might happen to that process given all the chaos kind of happening in the last couple days or so.
Let's turn to a story that our colleague Shri Mupidi published today about Anthropic. We have done some great reporting here at the Information about the gross margins of all these AI companies. And Shri's reporting found that actually Anthropic is projecting a slightly lower gross margin profile than what they initially had, maybe closer to 40%. Initially, maybe it was closer to 50%. I mean, look, we're talking still overall profitability is hard to come by in this business. But I just want to ask you broadly, as you look at that story, what do you think this says about what's happening at Anthropic? Is this less about Anthropic? Is it more about inference costs overall? How are you thinking about it?
Yeah, I mean, training and running AI models is very expensive, first of all. I think that's been obvious throughout all this. But I think it really goes to show that even a company like Anthropic, that's been seen as pretty financially careful, a company that doesn't have a huge free user base in the way that OpenAI does, the costs of, training and especially running these models can be very high and also somewhat unpredictable. So I think it just goes to show, yeah, even a company like Anthropic that's been looked at um, as being like a pretty conservative company with that sort of thing. Like, yeah, it's really expensive for them too.
Great. Well, Steph, I want to thank you for coming on. That is Stephanie Palazzolo, our AI reporter and author of AI Agenda here at The Information.